Detention was made by the Taiwanese game developer Red Candle Games, who also made the game Devotion, which you probably heard about cause it got removed from the Chinese Steam store for referencing a certain yellow bear.
Which when interacted with, would flash the words, Xi Jinping, the Winnie the Pooh moron in Chinese.
You stupid! Off your bloody pockets!
Detention is set in 1960s Taiwan during the White Terror period. Here's a quick history lesson from a guy that just spent a couple seconds on Wikipedia. After the Second World War, the CCP gained control of mainland China, and the nationalists essentially retreated to what we know as Taiwan, or the Republic of China. During this period, Taiwan had extreme censorship of anything anti-state, anything unpatriotic, anything communist, even anything Western.
I thought it was a Western!
That's what I thought, I swear to God.
They just hated everyone equally. If you were caught being a little scoundrel, then well, the government would take you on a road trip to Human Rights Avenue, so you could think about what you did. But don't think too much, otherwise you might start getting dangerous revolutionary ideas like, I think voting would be fun. Maybe toilets don't have to be on the ground. Dangerous Western ideas like this could even get you executed. But their main fear was communism, because right next door there was a man with a goofy-ass haircut named Mao Zedong that refused to use the toilet. He would prefer to dig a hole in the woods and before defecating would say, and I quote, "It's Maoing time." This is real. Let's move on to the game. We start out in a classroom. Our teacher, Miss Yin, is giving a lecture, but our protagonist can't stay awake. Clearly this teacher can't teach history as good as me. As we fall asleep, a man who the students call Instructor Bai makes his way to our classroom and asks if he could have a word with Miss Yin. He then asks her, "Miss Yin, have you seen this list before?" We wake up hours later with no other student in sight. Looking at the board, we see someone left a typhoon alert, so everybody probably evacuated the school. We pick up a note on one of the desks, and it seems like some students are worried about Miss Yin, because she keeps calling in sick. This is our notebook, by the way. Don't worry, the game doesn't drop giant walls of text on you for you to actually understand the story. The notebook actually does a great job at world building. For example, here you can see what this kid thinks about the school anthem. He likes the melody, but seems fed up that it's just another one of those propaganda songs. This not only tells us that this kid lives in a place that is constantly telling him what to think, but that it's so blatantly obvious that even this teenage boy can see the agenda from a mile away. Moving on, we go downstairs and find this public announcement from Instructor Bai, encouraging students to rat out anyone that may be pro-communist. This will go over well. I can't imagine anyone would lie and say someone is a communist because of some petty squabble. I, for example, would never report you to the KMT for saying that Better Call Saul is boring. As we're exploring the school, I have to mention that I'm really a big fan of the graphics. And so are you. Now, there's a lot of impressive visuals waiting for us later in the game, but I remember right away enjoying how different the visuals were when I first played this. It's kinda similar to The Cat Lady, but I think this game did it a little bit better. While we're in this area, I want to mention this photo and the quote that comes with it. It reads, "The roots below the earth claim no rewards for making the branches fruitful." This quote is written by the Indian poet Rabindranath. Here, this quote is about this man in the photo. We'll talk about its meaning later, but keep it in the back of your head. Anyway, in order to make your way back home, you have to pass by the auditorium. When you enter the auditorium, we get this amazing shot that shows just how big this place is, and how small this girl is in comparison. When you wake her up, she seems very confused as to how she ended up falling asleep on the stage. Our name is Wei, by the way. We warn her of the incoming typhoon and she refuses to leave without her necklace. You go to the storage room and use an umbrella to fish it out of the vent, and give the necklace to her just by dragging and dropping it from your inventory. I really appreciate their commitment to having as little UI as possible. The inventory bar is the only UI in the game, and it only shows up when you hover the mouse over the bottom, so that you can enjoy the visuals uninterrupted. She then thanks you for finding it for her, and you mention that it looks like someone threw it in there. You two then decide to keep going before the rain gets any worse. Unfortunately, we hit a dead end, as the bridge out of the school area has collapsed, and the river flows with what looks like blood. They're obviously a bit shaken up by this, but Wei comes in with a masterful cope, saying that it's probably just some oil man dumping chemicals or something. If we look at this symbolically, this river could be a reference to Sansu River, a mythological idea from Japanese Buddhism, not too different from the river Styx from Greek mythology. In the mythology of Sansu River, the deceased will cross the river in 3 ways: through a bridge, a ford, or the snake-infested waters. But the bridge here is collapsed, and these characters look very much alive. So are they dead? Or is this maybe a sign that when they do die, they are already barred from the afterlife? With no way out of the school, they decide to wait it out inside a classroom. They get to know each other a bit, and we finally get her name, Fang Rey Shin, or just Rey. Wei remembers that there's a phone in the principal's office, so we go there to see if we can contact anybody. As we make our way to the principal's office, the school changes into this dream or nightmare-like state, and we get this cutscene. Rey wakes up in the auditorium again, with Wei hung upside down, dead, with cuts all over his face. During the White Terror period, this is what was done to those who went against the state. The cuts on his face imply he was tortured, which was very common as well. You pick up a candle so that you're able to see and interact with your surroundings, and go into the storage room. In the vent, there's a dead rat where the necklace used to be, and a note with a conversation between 2 students. One of the teachers has started a book club, where they are reading some prohibited books. There's so much imagery and symbology right here, but I can't talk about it yet, and it's really driving me insane. Going outside, we pick up a key and a page from a children's book about the lingered. It says, "Don't be scared when you see the lingered. Just hold your breath and quietly walk away." When we go back, there is a lingered making some animal-like sounds. I will not mention Silent Hill, you can't make me do it. We hold our breath and we walk past it. Notice how the lingered looked a lot like Rey. If we step back and look at this objectively, it's almost like we are running and hiding from ourselves. We use the key we picked up to go to the main building again, and we hear the phone ringing from the principal's office. We pick up and try to explain our situation, only to get the response, "Fang, I'm waiting for you in the counselor's office." A little cheap to jump scare us like that, but at least it didn't just put a loud sound and call it a day.
I'm getting more of a seared bite.
As a matter of fact, this game has a lot less jump scares than I thought it would when I first saw the overall presentation and indie look of the game. It does a really good job of building tension with these overwhelming soundscapes and brutal visuals. Actually, I highly recommend you to check out the game's soundtrack. There's some great stuff in there. My favorite track is Hometown. It's a nice track to listen to when I'm putting a small pause on my grind set. Anyway, these things are your save points, very cool. When you examine this bulletin board, Rey says that these are all from her sophomore year, and Rey is supposed to be in her senior year. It's safe to assume that we are somehow in the past. But why? To play shitty games that suck at? When you go upstairs, first of all, there's a lady in the window. Let's just ignore that. But you go to the bathroom, and Rey kind of self-reflects on what is happening.
Why are you locked in the bathroom? You talking to me?
When suddenly, what is it that we are forgetting or afraid to remember? The phrase "afraid to remember" implies that it is something traumatizing that we voluntarily chose to repress. We will find out the more we play the game. We pick up this fence cutter and this dice right here and move on. Use the fence cutter on this barbed wire and move to the health center, where we find a note on the ground explaining another mechanic of the game, the food offerings. You can place down these cups of rice to distract the lingered and pass by unharmed, but there's an issue with this mechanic. It's a great idea, don't get me wrong, but the game always gives you another way of passing by an enemy, whether it's holding your breath or using the classrooms to get by. So the food offering, although a nice idea, seems kind of redundant, and I didn't really use it much throughout my experience with the game. Moving on, you get past the lingered and go into the storage room and pick up another dye and some paint thinner that you use on Mr. Cow's room to get these Taoist symbols off the door. To give some context, Mr. Cow was the janitor and used to be in the war just like Instructor Bai. In this first room, you find a utility knife, and it seems like Mr. Cow has stabbed this table repeatedly.
Our table!
Going into the other room, you find another dye in the bucket. It seems like there's some blood on the bucket. This might have something to do with the Taoist symbols on the door to Mr. Cow's room. My theory is that Mr. Cow did some unspeakable things during the war, but you can now use the 3 dye on the bowl here. When you throw the dye, they become teeth with a number code, and you can take the bowl. This, paired with the blood on the bucket, makes me think that Mr. Cow was maybe an interrogator and tortured people on a regular basis, gambled with their life in a way. I don't know, maybe I'm stretching it a bit. You go back to the first room and find this note. I don't know why this image is so funny.
How does anyone find that funny? I mean, seriously, how does anyone find that funny?
The prophecy is revealed when a sacrifice is made with the blood of the innocent. This is actually a clue. You're this cool-ass goblin thing, and the kid is, well, it's Wei. So you take his blood and put it in the dice bowl. You then use the bowl of blood to reveal some symbols on this table. Notice how before using the blood, there were already some wet marks on the table, like this has been done before. Anyway, you use these symbols and the number code from the rolled dice to open this lock. The puzzles in this game are pretty good. Nothing crazy, no Silent Hill 3 Shakespeare puzzle, but just hard enough where it gives you that sense of accomplishment after you complete one. You go up and make your way to the counselor's office, but it's locked. You now get chased by this tall creature. I couldn't get a good look at him, but I've seen people say that it is wearing a military uniform, and that it's supposed to be Instructor Bai. The bag that it carries on its back, it's said to be filled with heads, possibly representing the many people Instructor Bai killed during the war. You get away from him and find this counseling record. And judging by the age of the person on the record and the fact that we're supposed to go to the counselor's office, we can assume that this is about Rey. When you click out of the note, we're now in Rey's home. She doesn't seem particularly rich, and you hear some arguing in the background, most likely her parents. When you examine the mirror, Rey has a dialogue with herself. They say I should enjoy my youth, but I find it difficult. What happens after graduation? Where should I go? Will I end up like mom? She then shakes off those doubts and actually seems excited. Something good will apparently happen this weekend. She feels sleepy now, so you go to sleep. If a paper plane could whisk my dreams away from here, where I could wake up and find myself in a foreign land, to start a new life as a stranger to all, oh, how wonderful that would be. Isn't my voice acting great?
The money, Skylar! Where is the rest? Skylar! Where is the money?
This is definitely Rey talking. She feels so stuck, and the way she talks about her mom, it seems like the only option she has is to live life the way her mom did. Perhaps people expect her to, but in a new place with new people, there will be no expectation of who or what she should be. After going to sleep, you wake up in the middle of the school field, in front of another stage. Most likely another place for more propaganda to be shoved down the students' throats. This is how I wrote throats, by the way. English hard. Notice how in that little monologue, Rey dreamed of a paper airplane that could take her away far from here. Yet when we wake up, none of these planes are flying. They're actually plummeting straight down. She really has no escape from this place. When you enter this building, the first thing you find is this note about the only other real enemy in this game, the Lantern Spectre. The rule with this one is that you can't look at it, and when it approaches, you have to hold your breath. Going downstairs, we see these cages with kneeling hooded figures in them. These most likely represent the imprisonment and torture of anyone who broke martial law. We know that there is some secret book club where students are reading some prohibited books, so the school most likely has people in it that have been imprisoned or tortured. You find some spirit money and burn it in this furnace. Inside, there is a fan. After that, these puppets come to life, and you have to hold your breath to get past them. But I didn't do that and I died. This game does something really neat when you die. It takes you to this walkway that leads to the school, and this old lady will give you tips to get past the enemy you just died from. There is some meaning behind this old lady character, but I can't talk about it just yet. After getting the fan, you go to this entranceway and put the fan in this man's hand. You keep exploring this part of the school and stumble upon this film room, with a gravestone in the middle and some laughing faces in the projector that looks strangely like Chinese memes. They're very funny. You take the 3 incense sticks in front of the gravestone and a name appears. The gravestone belongs to Wei. When you get up, the chalkboard is filled with the word snitch. I'm saying snitch because I don't know if snitcher is an actual word and I don't feel comfortable saying it with a hard R. So Wei is obviously not buried under there, so it is safe to assume that this is symbolic. Is it saying that Wei died as a snitch? That wouldn't make much sense, seeing as the way we saw him in the beginning would imply that he was the opposite of a snitch. And I can't say anymore. I bet most of you have already figured out the whole twist of the game, but come on, we're having fun, right? You leave the film room and get killed by the Lantern Spectre. I can't really think of a symbolic meaning for the Lantern Spectre. If you have any ideas, please tell me in the comments, cause after a lot of thinking and pondering, I couldn't come up with anything. Anyway, you go downstairs and use the incense on this altar. And Rey slips in another criticism about her mother. She even dislikes the way that she prays, or what she prays for. Her mother is probably a good person, but to Rey, she represents everything she doesn't want in life. It's just sad, on both sides really. After praying, one of the prison doors opens up, and you take a wood token from the figure's back, and then place it in the hands of this nice gentleman. We have a note actually talking about these guys. It reads, Heibai Wu Chang clan, black and white in permanence. According to legends, there are 2 ancient officials. During routine inspection, misfortune befell them and they perished trying to protect one another. The Lord of the Dead, seeing their loyalty, appointed them the duty of messengers of death. It was then that people who died would see them arrive to claim their souls. The doors lead to the outside, and you go into this building where in here you find the roof key. Going into the roof, you see yourself. Well, by this point, you've probably realized that Rey is dead. Now that we know that she most likely took her own life, this explains the reference to Sansu River. Those who take their own life or still have unfinished business cannot cross the river to go to the afterlife. That's why the bridge is broken. That old lady that you see when you die is most likely a reference to Meng Po, the goddess of forgetfulness in Chinese mythology. It is her task to ensure that souls who are ready to be reincarnated do not remember their previous life or their time in hell. She helps souls rid themselves of all sin before going into their next life. As we learn more about the story, we're gonna have to go back like this in order to get as much of the symbology and meaning out of the game. Of course, there will be things I miss, so I encourage you to play the game yourself to see if you notice any other details that I have missed. Moving on, you go to this broadcasting room and play this tape. A small little piano riff begins to play, and you head over to this piano room and play that same melody. You take the puppet out of this cage and you place the puppet on this scene in the left side. When you examine the puppet, Rey says, "Its attire gives me a sense of familiarity." So this scene is obviously meant to represent something. We can already tell that the middle puppet is Wei, but who is this supposed to be? And what puppet is missing? You use this bloodstained film you picked up on the roof in this projector, and it shows what it seems like a code. It's actually not a code, it's a phone number. So you go to this room with the dial phone and input the numbers shown on the film. Whoever picks up says, "Fang, your country appreciates your assistance." They hang up and that tall monster shows up and tries to get into this room. When you leave the room, you pick up this puppet with a military uniform. I think this confirms that that tall monster is supposed to represent Instructor Bai. You place the puppet on the right side of the stage and this happens.
There was a misinput, calm down! You calm down!
Okay, we'll talk about this scene in just a little bit. You pick up this key and use it on this door in the basement. Once you reach the end of this hallway, you see Rey talking to Wei. Wei is giving Rey some book list, which is quite sensitive in material. And Rey says, I know reading these books could be trouble, but it should be our freedom to pursue knowledge, right? Wei compares her to Miss Yin, and Rey asks what's the relationship between Miss Yin and Mr. Chang. So if we go back to that little puppet show, we can deduce that Wei was taken and killed because he was part of this secret book club. So did Rey snitch on Wei? If that's the case, then that scene in the film room starts to make a lot of sense. But there's still a lot of questions, and well, I have the answers. In the next episode of White Terror Adventures. Why did our hero sell out Wei to the KMT? Who is this hooded puppet?
Bruh.
Who is Mr. Chang? Will Rey pass the 12th grade now that she's dead? Find out more. Moving on, you pick up the book club reading list.
Hickok 45 here.
Yeah, the symbology here is pretty on the nose. I don't think I need to explain it. When you pick up this book club reading list, Rey says, I've been weak, but you once told me the pen is mightier than the gun. No. I really love these moments where the game just lets you sort of ponder on what just happened. It doesn't just put you in a chase, it lets you reflect on the revelation, because that's what Rey would be doing at this moment. You reach this room filled with mirrors, when you see Miss Yin. However, Miss Yin is not being reflected, only Rey is. Instead of Miss Yin in the reflection, we see a hooded man that strongly resembles that hooded puppet. Miss Yin asks, remember what you did? Have you forgotten? Or do you not want to remember? Just a harmless piece of paper, right? That shoots a .45 caliber bullet. Instead, I had to die. He had to die. And many other students had to die. If you had a problem, why couldn't you have come talk to me instead? Rey breaks down and her reflection shoots the hooded figure. You then see Justice Chang Wang, also known as Chang Wen-shin, also known as the City God, also known as Finger. This is kind of a moral god. He has the power to tell right from wrong and helps give some sort of guidance to the people. Rey says, Justice Chang Wang, Mother likes to bring all her worries and concerns to you. Sometimes I think this is fruitless, but sometimes there's no one else to look for help. Maybe Rey is finally starting to understand her mother a little bit better. You then ask him some questions. Will my parents, who quarrel and fight, have a second chance together? You throw these pieces and get 2 flat sides up, which is the laughing answer. Essentially means maybe, or God doesn't know yet. Will I be able to live a simple life with loved ones and family? 2 sides face down, the crying answer. God disagrees. Will I be able to live life by my choices and follow my heart down my own path? The laughing answer again. How she overcomes her guilt of what she has done will dictate the answer to that question. Do I ask for too much? Is life just a never-ending bitterness? Or is it all just me? 1 side up, 1 side down. God is in full agreement. Rey was the one that used the evidence of the secret book club to kill its members. Not as directly as the previous scene showed, but she did cause their deaths. Her hatred for her mother is all her own. She could choose to look at her with compassion, but instead she resents her simply because she is afraid of becoming like her. Rey is a flawed person, like any of us, but she's also just a kid, and we will get to learn more about her and her intentions throughout the rest of the game. After tuning the radio, you're transported into Rey's room. When you leave the room, you find an incredibly depressing scene. When you interact with Rey's mother, Rey says, or thinks to herself, "I feel like mom has always been a traditional housewife. She doesn't complain even when wronged. I really don't like that." Again, her resentment towards her mother feels unwarranted. After all, it's not really her mother's fault. But unfortunately, this is the kind of thought process some kids will have when living in a dysfunctional or abusive family. When you interact with Rey's father, she says, "Back then, besides on the New Year's, Dad never drank at home. I miss the day when he had jokes and stories to tell." I may be reading too much into this, but I feel like Rey feels much stronger emotions towards her mother than her father. Probably because she sees more of herself in her mother, and is deeply afraid of becoming anything like her. Moving on, you go back to this room with a bunch of family portraits, and the eyes rubbed off. You turn off the lights and some sort of code appears on the pictures. And Rey's picture is crying this pink liquid. I assume this was maybe supposed to be blood, but they changed it to pink for some reason. Either that or they're making a Danganronpa reference.
Hey mommy, I'm a baby wavy. I want mommy Wami to give me white sauce from her Juggy Wuggies. Yummy.
At first, I thought this was simply like a goofy-ass spooky ghost, but looking back at it, I think it might represent Rey's parents fighting. Again, if you think I'm reading too much into this and being a stupid pinhead freak, feel free to ignore me. By the way, if you guys want the radio songs, I put them in the description. They're pretty sick. Anyway, you turn into the next station and your room is now upside down, and the piggy bank is broken on the floor. You then use the pink goo to track these footsteps and follow them through these doors. When you reach this room, there's a note on the floor. Husband cheating? Comes home late? We specialize in tracking people. I wonder who's gonna use this service. Entering the room, you are confronted with Rey's parents sleeping. The way they made this so cold and distant, simply by the imagery, is just amazing. I really love the art direction in this game. Going into this back room, you find 3 clocks. If you remember the family pictures on the wall, you're supposed to arrange the clocks in the direction of the pink goo in the pictures. Surprise, surprise, the dad cheats on his wife. You go back to the room with the family portraits and a new colorful door appears. We finally go and see the counselor that we were trying to see at the beginning of the game. Before he appears though, we get a first look at some color. Another thing to notice is the fact that when we first see him, he appears to be on a small boat or a moat or something. He's essentially the one that can carry us across Sansu River, or at the very least, that's how Rey sees him. I also love the track that plays in this scene. It reminds me of the track Earth from Berserk. But a more sinister version. It's such a big change from what we've been hearing up until now. You've mostly been hearing ambient sounds or droning bassy sounds. This haunting track almost feels blissful compared to the rest. And it probably reflects how Rey feels. She hates so much of her life. Going to the counselor and at least letting it out, although sad, is probably the most at peace she ever felt. When we first meet him, Mr. Chang, that's his name, I think I forgot to say that. He mentions that he got Rey's paper plane, and from what he says next, we can assume that Mr. Chang has already had some sessions with Rey. He's already aware of her problems at home, and Rey has asked him about his time abroad. There's no doubt that to Rey, Mr. Chang seems incredibly competent, and she maybe even looks up to him. Rey is living in a time of extreme oppression. One of her main role models is an aggressive drunk, and she doesn't look up to her mother because she just sees her as a victim. And here you have this adult that has been abroad, is educated, and has time to listen to her problems and even find solutions, even though he's contractually obligated to help students. The point is, paycheck or not, he seems to care at least. And we can see this when he suggests that him and Rey should take a stroll down Boulevard, presumably to teach her, because right after that, he mentions how there are many things their censored books don't tell them about. He disappears and you pick up the paper plane. Going back, there's a new note on the dining table. And it's a new radio station, so we're gonna get a sick new track. The new radio station leads us to this neat puzzle, where we have to guide the silhouette of this fedora man.
Fedoras are awesome. Mine's better. Fedoras are...
We can then get into our father's study, and into the kitchen/laundry room, where we swipe a coin from one of the jackets. This door then leads outside to the ticket booth of a theater, but you're not supposed to give the coin. What you're supposed to do is put the coin in the piggy bank and then change it into the upside down room where the piggy bank was broken. In the broken piggy bank, we find a movie ticket. This is actually a really neat way of showing us what Rey did to pay for that movie ticket. Slowly took money from her parents without them noticing to save up for that ticket. Or maybe a movie ticket only cost 20 cents back in the 60s, cause you know, inflation.
And then, oh fuck!
When we go back outside, the streets are so lively and colorful. Kinda like when we first went to see Mr. Chang. So, Mr. Chang. Now we know why that necklace was so important to Rey. It was a gift from Mr. Chang. I mean, this isn't just a case of pedophilia. It's also the school counselor. This was the only person that Rey could reliably trust, and he took advantage of that. It's really twisted when you think about it. When you go back to your dad's study, the study has been trashed, and on the floor you find a search warrant. When I went home that day, father had already been taken away. I asked mom what happened. She quietly replied, "Dad got his hands dirty, but he'll live." Hearing this, I felt as if she was smiling underneath. So Rey's mother called those investigators in that ad and got them to find something minor that put Rey's father away. Or they just planted something on him. Rey's life is completely falling apart at this point. In Rey's room, you find an assignment book, and Rey describes it as a reasonable excuse to go to the counselor's office. At this point, that creep is all that she has. But when you go see Mr. Chang, he says that the counseling process is nearly over, and hopefully she won't need him anymore. When you examine the counseling records on the desk, Rey says, "It's over. No matter what's been written on here, there's only farewell." Also, notice how when you go to visit him this time, everything is dark and cold. A big contrast from the warm and hopeful visuals from before. Moving on, you go to this theater stage with Rey's room. You see various Reys that explain her journey, from dread to hopefulness and back to dread. First, you give this one the paper plane. She talks about how awful her home life is and how her parents' relationship affected her. Next, you give the necklace. She talks about meeting Mr. Chang, which gave her some sort of hope for the future. How for a while, she was finally happy. Finally, you give the counseling records. And she talks about the dread and loneliness she felt when she couldn't see him anymore. A door appears in the middle of the stage, and you open it slightly to hear a conversation between Miss Yin and Mr. Chang. Miss Yin is appalled by him going after a child, and Mr. Chang says she's so mature for her age. Yeah, I'm sure. Miss Yin tries to get some sense into Mr. Chang, saying she only needs a push in the right direction, not for you to wrap your arms around her. Mr. Chang says it's none of her business, and Miss Yin replies, "How is it not? You're stuck in your little romance. Did you forget about us?" So, as you've probably realized, Rey has snitched on Miss Yin because she made Mr. Chang stop seeing her, and because she probably thought that they were together. If you remember her talk with Wei in the classroom, she was very interested in what the relationship between Miss Yin and Mr. Chang was. What she didn't realize was that Mr. Chang was also part of the secret book club. That's what Miss Yin was referring to. Now you will make a lot of choices. You will talk to these silhouettes of Rey and answer these questions as Rey would, or at least how Rey would if she knew what she did and finally wants to move past it. As you move around the school, you see ghosts of Rey doing things that we were doing while we were playing. This shows us that Rey has been stuck, living out her biggest regrets over and over in this purgatory-like space. She's always woken up in that chair by Wei. They always have to find her necklace that she threw in the vents because of how frustrated she was with Mr. Chang, and the cycle repeats itself. As you explore, you also see visions of Wei and other students interacting with other members of the book club, and find out that Miss Yin managed to escape to Taiwan, but unfortunately died of lung cancer at the age of 50. All while you follow this man around the school. You even see the moment that Rey told Instructor Bai about this secret book club. Miss Fang, the country appreciates your assistance. You are now playing as that man we were following. Reading the notes on his diary, we find out that this is Wei. He survived imprisonment and survived long enough to see the end of martial law, although his youth is lost forever. All because he wanted to be free. Before reaching the school, we see the old lady talking about Rey, barred from the heavens and hampered from the underworld, alone and wandering forever she goes. As I walked through the rundown school, I felt such pity for Rey. She did something horrible, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's her fault. It's not her fault that her life was the way that it was. It's not her fault that she had a crush on a teacher. A lot of kids do that, but most of the time the teacher doesn't take advantage of that. It's not her fault that she, a child, had the power to imprison and have people killed. Of course what she did was wrong, but if martial law wasn't in place to begin with, none of this would have happened. Wei sits down at his old desk, and Rey appears in front of him. Maybe she can finally be free. Detention is a very real horror. The horror that does not come from the little jump scares or the little chases, but a more grounded and real human horror. I hope in the future people won't have to experience this type of horror ever again.